Welcome to FYI, and it's a pleasure today to have my guest, Jonathan Blakley. Jonathan Blakley is the program director for Minnesota MPR Public Radio News here in the Twin Cities, and has worked all over the world. We are lucky to have him, and I'm lucky to have you here on this show. Jonathan, welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you very much for your. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
I'm honored.
My honor, because you have done so much in this business, but the thing that is most evident here in the Twin Cities is the fact that you've really changed the dynamics of Minnesota Public Radio News. I listen to it faithfully.
Thank you.
For years.
Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Kathy Wurzer actually was a guest on my show here a few months ago or weeks ago.
She's delightful.
She's wonderful. But it used to be, those of us who are of a certain age, we get used to certain things being on at a certain time and things, the programming being the same. It's been very noticeable in a good way, all the diversity you've brought. And would I be incorrect to say that it's brought because of all your travels around the world and everything you've discovered that people need to know? They need to know more.
I would say that I've seen a lot, and I've talked to a lot of folks, and growing up in Detroit, the Motor City, a bit of a different ethnic dynamic and makeup than still Midwesterners. We're all Midwesterners, but Detroit is probably still about 85% African American. So I grew up in a different type of town than the Twin Cities, but that means that I bring a different type of ear, if you will, to radio, and I was a type of person who had radio's in my DNA. Radio was either under my pillow or blasting out of my mother's in my father's room, or is blasting, it's still blasting in the kitchen, in my mother's room today, kitchen today. There were 2 radios in the bathroom, at least. And there was a radio, even in my grandmother's house, both my grandmothers, there were radios in every room in the house. It's just the way it was. There was not a room without a radio. Matter of fact, there were the radios that you could warm yourself to, and
I remember those.
which still work.
Yeah.
But yes, I do believe I bring a bit of maybe a diversity in thought because of my environment. I've seen a lot, be it just growing up in Detroit or having been overseas and working for, what is it, 3 networks, for AP, National Public Radio, and CBS through WWJ. I've had to deal with several continents, a lot of the globe.
Well, I noticed even some of the cities, Cairo and Port-au-Prince in Haiti. I've been to Haiti, and that in itself is a life-changing experience.
Yes, it is. I mean, beautiful people, and there's such richness on that island. So I was a foreign desk producer at MPR in Washington. So whenever there was something going on, I would be one of the field producers going to that either celebration or crisis. Chances are it was a crisis. So I was there, I guess was it 2010 of the Haiti earthquake?
I think so.
Yeah, so whenever that earthquake was, the last earthquake, I was there shortly after that, and it was devastating. It was bad. And you could see how poor it was prior to the earthquake and what they were left with after the earthquake. There are a lot of TV images, and certainly international press was there for months, if not years, after this disaster. But it's one of those things that unless you see it, I mean, it was bad. Not the worst assignment I've had. The worst assignment I had was Hurricane Haiyan in the Philippines.
Ooh.
That was bad.
Oh, my.
That was dead bodies in the street, and sleeping on the floor of abandoned it was an abandoned restaurant, actually, and rats next to you playing cards. They were nice rats, but there were rats all over the place. and that was a very, very. All we had was a generator, and that was a difficult situation because basically you had, just feet of water come into the central Philippines, Tacloban, and then just come right out, and it took everything with it. It was awful, really, really bad.
And there's nothing we can do about Mother Nature.
Nope. Except get out of the way.
Hearing you talk reminds me of the current narrative about news. The term fake news. This is real news, and it's all real news.
Yep.
That's the thing people need to know. As a journalist, when you cover an actual story, you don't make things up.
You can't.
It's pathetic to think that anybody would think that people reporting the news and reporting the facts are not reporting the facts.
When you've been in the business as long as we have, you know folks who have given their lives to tell folks what's going on.
Yeah.
So the term fake news is insulting to me because I know people who have given their lives to tell the story.
Yeah.
I don't hear fake news. It doesn't, it never existed prior to now. Yes, you have tabloids and folks wrote stories that were either intentionally or unintentionally false, but there was never fake news. And it's kind of sad that that's now part of our lexicon, because if folks can't believe the truth, then where is our democracy?
Amen. There was a television reporter here named Bill, and I feel badly. I can't remember his last name, but he was killed in Managua, Nicaragua. And Walter Cronkite, Cronkite showed it on the CBS Evening News. And those sorts of stories. And
Well,
yours,
I mean,
of course,
did Nixon say if I've lost, oh no, it was Lyndon Johnson, if I lost Cronkite, I've lost the war.
lost the election, yeah.
Lost the election, yeah.
Well, it's true. I had the pleasure to have Cronkite during one of the documentaries I produced. I had him interview Howard K. Smith, and Howard K. Smith interviewed Cronkite.
My goodness,
So
wow.
the two interviewees extraordinaire doing their work, and he was definitely quite a man.
You think about when Kennedy was shot, and you look at live news and live cable news, but that moment when he learned that President Kennedy had passed, that's like the ultimate live shot.
Oh yeah.
And
I remember he took off his glasses.
and he had to stop. He didn't have an IFB in his ear or anything like that.
No.
He was just there.
Yep.
And he knew that I got to get the country through this.
Yep.
You're not going to do it with fake news. There was never fake news. Those two words together probably never computed to him.
No. Oh no.
Yeah.
No, nor to
us.
Yeah. Yeah. It's incredible.
Yeah.
When I spoke about diversity, I was speaking also and primarily about the fact that we hear so many now different points of view.
Sure.
It's not having anything to do with race. It's to do with what's happening in certain parts of the world that you have brought to MPR from the Islamic world or from the Muslim world, from
Well, it's just
Kentucky,
acknowledging.
you know.
You have to acknowledge that we're not in this thing by ourselves, and that's okay. And until I think my first overseas assignment was going to Baghdad, and I had to manage the house, which was an abandoned house in the war, outside of the green zone where we were staying, and that's where our NPR's headquarters was. Fox was across the street, CBS was next to us. We're all in houses. We shared a generator, actually 2 generators. Fox had the swimming pool, so when the day was over, we went to Fox's swimming pool. You realize how beautiful this globe is when you get on an airplane and go somewhere. If you've been blessed, if you have the resources, or even if you're part of your job, you're blessed to go see the rest of this world.
Absolutely.
And you see people who are just like, I had to manage 13 Iraqis who were journalists and drivers and other staff there, and I was their boss. I'm in their country, and I'm their boss, while my country is at war with their country. Awkward.
Yeah.
And we're sleeping in the same house. Had to.
Wow.
But you're going to learn pretty fast that everyone's going to get along, and we're all human.
Amen.
And then from day one, it was just, you give respect, you get respect. And some of my best friends are either still in Baghdad or they've moved, but those were amazing relationships.
Amen.
That I still have with them through text.
I had the blessing to do 2 films in Iran, and one for the Shah. Well, they were both for the Shah when he was in power, and there were promotional films to get tourists over there.
Yeah.
And
things were much
skiing,
different.
we had, yes, it was a different world, but they were ski films. The Shah had built 4 ski areas for the Westerners. And so when Khomeini took over, he only allowed men to ski, and that was the end of that.
Yep.
But one of the fun parts, Billy Kidd and Susie Chaffrey were my stars.
Oh my gosh.
And so
Wow.
I took Billy and Susie over because I had been at the ski world too on television. And it was a, forgive the old-fashioned expression, a cowboy and Indian chase scene. The cowboy was going to chase the Indian, and the Indian was going to then chase the cowboy. And Susie had her headdress on, and which was an authentic war bonnet, and Billy. So when the Iranians saw this from the chairlift, they were going, whoop, 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 whoop.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
They knew that it was American Indians.
Yeah, but that's what that's their impression of America.
Yeah.
That's what they knew.
Yes.
Wow.
Now, as far as radio is concerned, if I may,
Sure.
A couple little anecdotes.
Sure.
First of all, radio. I started on radio in 1943 on KDKA, the world's first radio station.
Pittsburgh.
My hometown, Pittsburgh. And I was a boy singer, but probably the world's most popular morning host, probably even to this day, his name was Reed Cordick, and he was so funny. And he had like an 80% share of the audience.
Really?
He owned Pittsburgh. So KDKA had just hired a new newscaster, and his name was Tom Bender.
Okay.
So Reed introduced him for his first newscast, saying, "And now, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Bender will render the news."
Oh, okay.
Bender, render. of course, Bender broke up.
He's done.
He couldn't get the first story out.
But live radio.
Absolutely. Another live radio thing that happened to me in a small station in Montana during my early days of local broadcasting. It was in Anaconda, and the station manager was very playful. So I was sitting on a chair that was elevated, and I was doing the newscast, and I was talking about President Eisenhower. Well, I said I started to say President Eisenhower, and I didn't know that Mike, the station manager, had come up and stuck a pencil near my behind. And so I said, "President Eisenhower." That was that.
We don't have that much fun like that anymore. I think that wouldn't fly, even though. No, I'm not going to ask. Could I do that to Kathy and get away with it? No. No, I'm not going to do that. That would be a bad idea.
To Kathy. Describe, please, some of your other radio experiences.
Well, I mean, again, radio's in my DNA. I grew up, and outside my window, just because of the part of Detroit, in the northwest side of Detroit, most of the TV and radio transmitters are within maybe 5 miles of where I grew up, because that's just the center of the city. It's not higher, really. It's just the center of the metro area. So I went to bed to sleep and woke up seeing the flashing red lights on the tower. It's just, those were my night lights.
Wow.
And I distinctly remember when my father gave me a transistor radio. I just remember the moment when my father gave me a transistor radio. Much like this one. I told you I had props.
Oh, that's good. I want to see.
I had props. It wasn't this one, because I took that radio apart at some point.
Okay.
But that's That's what I listen to Ernie Harwell on.
Oh, I love it.
And every Detroiter, even if you're younger than me, you can relate to having a radio under your pillow. So that's what I slept with under my pillow.
I love it.
Just your basic AM radio, which is a little dusty. It does work, but you know how back, the volume kind of gets crackly, so we're not going to turn it on. But anyway, so this is what I slept with under my pillow.
I love it.
Meanwhile, my mother is listening to Martha Jean the Queen, Wake Up Detroit, at 5 in the morning, every morning religiously. Martha Jean the Queen, WQBH, she owned that radio station. So I want to say the first, I may be wrong about this, but certainly certainly a pioneer African American woman owning a radio station. 1400, WQBH.
Absolutely.
Yep, I think it was the Queen broadcast here at QBH. So I'm listening to Ernie Harwell under my pillow. Dad's listening downstairs to WWJ and all news radio station, 950. Mom's waking up in the bed with, in the kitchen. My dad's down in the kitchen. Mom in the bed. I'm hearing Martha Jean the Queen. And my sister, when she comes home from school, she's listening to Electrifying Mojo. So it was all radio. TV was in our lives, obviously, but radio was the center of our lives. Yeah. I even had a bike radio. I had a radio this is a bike radio.
Oh, I love it.
So it actually screwed onto the bike. So I'm riding the bike with the big handlebars and the banana seat. And this was my bike radio.
Oh, that's great.
And it still works. I didn't take that apart.
I think it's wonderful that people like yourself, a lot of people like yourself, don't exist because they didn't have the interest. What captured you to say, I want to hear this all the time.
Yes.
Ernie Harwell, as I mentioned before, he came up to my mother. She was dying at one stage in her life, then she survived, but God bless him. By the way, for those who don't remember, this is on YouTube as well, and people in Detroit can watch this, and I hope that they will, and then they'll remember you and the fact that Detroit radio was so important.
Because of Ernie.
Yeah, Ernie for Detroit Tigers.
Right.
But also the Lone Ranger
was WXYZ, exactly.
Invented there. Yeah.
But Ernie, the bar was so high, and still is in some extents, but radio has changed immensely. But the bar is so high for doing excellent radio in Detroit. Not everyone's going to sound like Ernie Harwell, and not everyone, but you couldn't do bad radio in Detroit, LA, New York, Chicago. It's just one of those cities where the radio was 100% top quality.
Oh yeah.
24/7.
Yep.
Period. So that's part of my DNA as well. It's like I want to make good radio. That's why I love to edit stories as well. I want to help make something that's really good even better.
That's fabulous.
So that's now things have changed. Technically, this is my radio. My phone is now my radio.
Yes.
Isn't
that incredible?
Which is fine. I rather listen to it off the air. That's just me. But now we have smart speakers. This is a Google Home, and you can stream Minnesota Public Radio or any radio station, quite frankly, across the globe on this little thing. If you have the internet, you're streaming it. This one, by the way, is yours.
Oh, well, thank you very
Yes.
much. I won't know how to use it.
I barely know how to use it myself.
You'll have to teach me.
I will teach you how to use it.
Please.
But it's yours.
Oh, thank you
Yep,
so much.
Yep. It's not a hockey puck. It's a.
I'm going to give you a copy of my
Well,
book.
thank
too.
you so much.
As
Well,
soon
later
as-
on,
as soon as
because
I
you have to
plug
sign
it.
it.
I have to
sign
plug it and
Okay,
sign
no
it. Yeah,
problem.
that's
Thank
true.
you.
We'll do a shameless plug.
But
Well,
yeah.
thank you. My goodness.
I mean, so you talked about diversity earlier, and public radio has moved forward. And National Public Radio International, PRX, any number, WNYC or any number, WBZ, any number of the other large, including American Public Media, the large radio stations or networks that also distribute. We can't sound like the way we sounded in 1985. It's not going to work. Radio, I know what radio sounded like in 1985 because I was listening to it while I was riding my bike. But that's not going to work for today. If people who are younger than me can't relate to who's on the radio, they're not going to listen. So you look at, well, I've made changes at Minnesota Public Radio. I salute National Public Radio, which has made many more changes, and some of those changes are the changes that I brought to Minnesota Public Radio, such as Sam Sanders or Joshua Johnson. But National Public Radio has also added more people of color, Noel King, who's on Morning Edition, Elsa Chang on All Things Considered. I'm thinking of, Tanzina Vega on The Takeaway.
Yep.
That was a big, John Hockenberry gone, and they had to do something big. They could have gotten any number of people. Same thing with Joshua. Joshua's taking over Diane Rehm, who had done radio for 40 years. And there are so many good radio hosts out there. They could have gone with anyone. They went with Joshua because that's a choice for the future.
Yeah.
And it's also in MPR's programming. Tom Weber, who used to work for us, was very, very good at talking to different types of audiences. And when you talk to different types of audiences, you go out to Rondo, you go out to other parts of the state, and you talk to different people, they will respond. They're going to call. They're going to call. They're going to be part of the radio station. This is public radio, and they're going to listen and stay with us. And quite frankly, that's why our numbers, in my opinion, have gone up in the past 3 years pretty dramatically. Some of that is just what's going on in the world and Trump bump. There is that. But people came to us, in 15 and 16, but they stayed here. It's not a Trump hump. People are still here because we're giving them more than we used to, and we have to. I think of the White House reporter for one of the White House reporters for National Public Radio, which you'll hear a lot, Aisha Roscoe. I mean, just saying her name right now is like, well, not a 57-year-old white guy.
No.
And she has a very distinct Southern accent. She is a young African-American woman, and you're hearing her voice regularly now. She was just in Helsinki. That is a conscious decision for National Public Radio and public radio as a whole to sound more inclusive and reflect more of the country, and that's what we have to continue to do at Minnesota Public Radio, reflect our state, which is changing, and it just is, which is fine. Change is good. We're evolving. We have to evolve with and not fight against it.
Amen. I still know that you maintain some of the I'd say older folks. Cokie Roberts was a nice acquaintance of mine.
Really? Yep.
And I know that Cokie is on.
She's in the mornings.
Yeah. And has a brilliant background. That's the thing that one of the many things, and not being solicitous here, that I love about MPR. That's what I listen to almost exclusively.
Me too, actually.
And I wonder why.
What is that
why would that be? But you're the boss.
One of them.
But
not the boss, one of them.
to know that people like Cokie's in her 70s.
Yeah.
And she still is as hip.
You wouldn't know it by her voice.
No, and nor her opinions or anything else. But people like Cokie. I mean, her father was a congressman. Her mother was ambassadress to the Vatican, et cetera, et cetera. Very deep, quality people. And yet, they mix in so well with the younger people who also mix in with the older people because they have backgrounds that are not just straight out of high school.
Exactly.
They've lived a lot of life.
Right, and that's how that's what public radio is best known for, not just being truthful, but context. How did we get here? Why are we here? What's going on? What's going on? What just happened? Okay, tell me why. How are we here? And where are we going based on how we got here? That is the secret sauce of public radio news, being able to give context.
Right. One thing of which I'm reminded, my second cousin, Cecil Brown, was one of Edward R. Murrow's boys in London. And Cecil, I say, both the best things in life happen by accident and also it's divine intervention. My cousin, his mother and my grandmother were sisters, and my mom grew up with him in Pittsburgh. And then when we moved to New York City, I got to spend lots of time with Cecil. He was an ABC commentator at that time. And his story, though, and it's in my book, by the way,
Okay.
is he was torpedoed in the South China Sea 10 days after Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
Wow.
And so Murrow threw, and he literally clung to something
Yeah.
that was floating.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was a British ship called the HMS Repulse. So anyway, through some sort of magic, even in those days, they certainly didn't have iPhones
No.
or whatever.
No. They just had their voices. They screamed. You know.
But Murrow heard about it and said, "I want you to be one of my boys
Wow.
in London," and that's how that happened.
You know, I've met a lot of folks in my career through radio, and I've been exclusively radio. The only time I did TV was an intern when I was still in college at Western Michigan University. Go Broncos!
Kalamazoo.
Go Broncos! Yes, brown and gold.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of the people I would say I cherish learning from and actually even doing a few edits with, but just working with Dan Shore.
Oh, I met Dan Shore in
yeah.
D.C.
Yeah, he just was an amazing. You know, Bill Clinton. So you remember the weekly radio address? Again, radio.
Oh, sure.
He timed the radio address so after Dan Shore's chat with Scott Simon.
Mm-hmm.
So then he would do his weekly radio address, but he had to hear Scott Simon first.
Well, Daniel Shore was a giant, and I think he had been mistreated a little bit too by.
Yes, he did, but he survived.
Oh yeah.
And just sharp. Really, really, really good guy.
Yeah, he was a guest on our TV shows in D.C. Before I went to Detroit, and after I left here, I was on television in Washington, and our anchor David Shoemaker used to have these really popular news people in as guests, so that's how I got to meet Dan Shore.
I'm going to go full circle. I want to show you one more radio.
Okay. Then
And let me show you this too. I'm probably not going to show you this, but I have one of those.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, that's-
WWJ.
Yep.
Wow.
News Radio 95. Before we became News Radio 950, we were News Radio 95.
Wonderful.
And I'm probably not supposed to have this. If they want it back, I can give it to them.
Yeah.
They don't use this logo anymore. But anyway, so I'm sure this is the radio that my father gave me. At some point, I want this to be the radio that I give my daughter, Imara. Daddy loves you. And it's actually also a weather radio.
Oh, wow.
And it has a crank, so you can crank it, and it has a flashlight. But anyway, I look forward to the moment where I can give this thing, this thing that has been part of my life, to my daughter. She'll be 4 in November.
Oh, congratulations.
So I think maybe this birthday, but I know that when I give it to her, she's going to be really cool, and she's going to try and swipe.
Yes.
Anyway, this is going to be my daughter's radio, and we'll see if it takes her where it takes her career. But anyway, I want her to love radio as much as I do.
Well, I'm sure she will, and we love you.
Well,
and
thank you.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
And shameless plug time. This is actually a serious book. It's kind of the history of broadcasting, really, my life story. So it's available on Amazon, called My Life Among the Giants. And I hope you'll take a look. And I'll be very happy right now to give it to my new friend and Mr. Blakley.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.